summative evaluation for the 2024-25 school year. So I know we're well into the 25-26 school year, but we do it at this time for a variety of reasons that I will talk about in just a moment, if we can advance the slides. So this goes through the evaluation schedule. I know we go over this every time we have one of these evaluation committee meetings, but I think it's important just to remind folks of where we are, what the process looks like, and what we're doing specifically today. So we do a process throughout the year of what we call formative progress and semi-annual feedback to Dr. Battle. And so we have already done Q1, Q2, and Q3, Q4. So the board gives direct written feedback to Dr. Battle. In those periods of time, we do a summation of that feedback publicly at evaluation committee meetings throughout the year. And then this is our final committee meeting. We recently have completed written feedback on the summative evaluation, which includes all 4 quarters of the 24-25 school year. And sort of fiscal year. So the timeline for these things goes from July 1st of 2024 to June 30th of 2025. And then we start a new session. So we actually will be giving feedback for Q1 here in just a little bit, actually. But right now we are looking at the 24-25 school year. Written feedback was given, and this is our public summary of the summative evaluation and board feedback. This is the same thing, but in a picture format. And so you can see where we are for the 24-25 evaluation cycle. Okay, so now we're just going to jump right into what we look at. So we are going to look at each one of the focused outcomes. So first we'll have literacy. And then we'll do numeracy, SEL, and transitions. So the process looks just like this. So the director provides quarterly feedback to us on the progress related to each of these categories, includes evidence including benchmark information, TCAP, TVOS, attendance, specific things around implementation. A number of those also have data points to them in addition to being just output oriented. And each of those things are also related to the signature initiatives, but they come under the categories of the different focused outcomes. So our process as a board is that we each review the written feedback that's given to us about what has happened in that prior quarter. At the end of the year, we're looking at each of the quarters plus the summative information that comes from the state as we have it. So again, TCAP, TVOS, the sort of specific outcomes data. And then we provide that feedback directly to Dr. Battle quarterly. And then here, again, we do it biannually, so twice a year. I think that's right, in terms of how you say that word. And then again, in a summative sense. Okay, so here are the results of our feedback for the year. So in looking at literacy, and the goals that are outlined within the strategic plan and Dr. Battle's goals are that in each of the categories, literacy and numeracy, students will have 50% of students will have met or exceeded their growth goal on the ongoing tests that they're taking throughout the year. And so in this category, the rating was met, and the evidence cited by board members was related to TVOS, so level 5 for literacy, level 5 composite. By the way, we all know this, but that is 4 years now running. On growth projections, we had 54.4% of students meet or exceed their growth projections. In terms of proficiency increases, we saw slight but important increases in our 3 through 8 ELA scores, also across the English categories we'll look at in a minute. Scholars portfolio. In particular here, a couple of things cited by board members were around different elements within the scholars portfolio, the accelerating scholars, promising scholars, enriching scholars, but also there's some work that the district's been doing on tutoring that has had some promising outcomes, and that is an important factor for catching students up and getting students into that met or exceeded category. And then lastly, a lot of work on literacy in terms of professional learning through the various things that are cited here, in particular instructional learning networks, but also a couple of sort of smaller groups among a set of schools in 3 through 8 and also at high school. When we look at literacy, so again, the goals here were met. A level 3 in numeracy, but again, a level 5 composite. So these have felt like positive outcomes from the perspective of the board. 51.4% meeting or exceeding the growth projections. And I think we would agree, and Dr. Battle would agree with this too, the mantra of know where you are, but don't stay there. I think we'd all love to see those numbers continue to increase. But this kind of steady progress over so many years is showing up in terms of, again, increased proficiency levels and overall large proficiency gains since 21-22. Again, the scholars portfolio and professional learning. These are the sort of frameworks and building blocks that are allowing us to get here. And when I see these things, one of the things that I frequently say to folks is that I think our ceiling is still pretty high in terms of our ability to continue to see the kinds of gains we've seen. It would be surprising to not continue to see gains when you have built really good systems around things like ongoing supports in the scholars portfolio, ongoing learning for educators in terms of the professional learning supports that are being done. And the idea that we're looking at this all regularly in partnership with researchers, both at peer and in other places. When we look at SEL, we've continued to see again, slight but important improvements on attendance and the sort of increases in the right areas around daily attendance, perfect attendance, and also decreases in chronic absence. In some places, some schools, those have been larger. In other schools, those have been smaller. But one of the things that is an ongoing set of work is, again, working with peer and others to try and determine what are the things, and this is a question the board is asked frequently, and that we know staff are working on, which is what are the things that are working at one set of schools that are seeing more consistent increases in the areas you want to see in attendance and decreases in chronic absence, and applying those across schools. We are still waiting for final attendance numbers overall, so those numbers that you see there are from Q4. But we're waiting for final attendance numbers from the state for last school year. On navigators, one of the things that was cited by a couple board members in this category is the improvements that were made around the early elementary students. So allowing early elementary students to use symbols rather than words in order to give some sense to their navigator as to how they are feeling. One of the things that did was to reduce some of the ability of teachers to give feedback, but that is a thing that then the district is working on. Sort of this theme of know where you are, but don't stay there. I also hear district leaders frequently say, you said, we heard, we did. So these kinds of cycles of continuous improvement that feel so important. And then lastly, one of the things around advocacy centers and peace centers that board members have cited is this ongoing increase in preventative support. So we continue to see the number of and percentage of preventative supports being done in the advocacy centers and peace centers creep up, which is a good thing from the perspective of the social and emotional health of students in schools. Lastly, here on transitions, the graduation data here is still embargoed. But we have every reason to believe that we'll have good outcomes there. On university MNPS, 164 students awarded this year in scholarships at Belmont, Fisk, Lipscomb, TSU, Trevecca, and Vanderbilt. One of the reasons that this is important is because TSU has had some challenges this year, and so the actual number of scholarships available to students at TSU has been reduced significantly. And so this number is not all that far off from last year's number, and that's significant because the number at TSU has gone down fairly significantly, like half probably of the number from last year. But also, 34 scholarships at Vanderbilt in their inaugural year is one of the highest numbers among these institutions, and that is a full ride plus additional dollars. And so really excited to see that. Yeah, way less than half on TSU. These are this is sort of, in summation, as board members have looked at this and as we've discussed achievements, in particular around student outcomes, this is just a listing of the types of things that we've seen. So again, TVOS level 5 and composite. I think we all acknowledge that math, that 3 is exactly where you're supposed to be. That's meeting expectations for the year. But that there is some work that we are ongoing trying to do in math. That said, for us to be outpacing state growth in both math and an integrated math 1, 2, and 3 is quite an achievement. And we saw proficiency gains in nearly all tested subject areas in nearly all groups. So really seeing consistent growth over time, which is where we want to be. But again, know where you are and don't stay there. We're always going to be pushing for more. So in a final sense, we did believe that all of these goals were met in terms of increasing the types of outcomes we wanted to see in each of these categories. And now I'll get into a couple of things that board members, I'll stop and pause for any comments or questions from the board. Always glad to see that people feel as though their feedback has been reflected. And thank you very much. Yay. So now we're going to get into a couple of things that we have highlighted as things we want to make sure that we're continuing to support, that we are continuing to hear about over the course of the next year. So first, on literacy, we know that there was a new requirement in state law around including screener data, around giving, that's a specific requirement in state law, so making sure that we see that happen, but also, board members talking about their own use of the Every Student Known dashboard, and it being a thing that we, those of us who have students in the system, feel like is really helpful, and at the same time could always see improvement. So more sort of things here around helping parents to understand the specifics of what's in there. The district has done some really good explanations, a couple of strong videos for parents to look at there. Folks were excited about the innovations in tutoring and want to make sure that we're letting parents know that those things are available where they are. And then as AVID continues to grow in the district, continue to hear how AVID is impacting students. There was a morsel in a peer study about this, and I think in the sense that students who had experienced AVID were also seeing gains in other areas and continuing to think about what does that mean for all students in the district. On numeracy, here, the basic question and thing that folks highlighted is just continuing to see curriculum implementation at the elementary level and at the high school level get deeper and give teachers and leaders what they need to understand how to continue to grow in math. On SEL, we know we made a shift in terms of how we're doing the funding around school nurses. So school nurse funding, there's funding available for every school to have a nurse. That funding moved from the district to the health department. So continuing to see the same level of service there is something that has been highlighted as important. Obviously, school safety is always important. Never never off of our minds and a big deal this year. So thinking about Evolve rollout, thinking about SROs, how we're doing threat assessments, safety ambassadors, all of these things that the board will continue to want to support and also continue to hear how those things are functioning. And then highlighting some of the issues around support for immigrant communities. So as we see changes in terms of how the federal government in particular is interacting with immigrant communities, ensuring that we are continuing to support all of those communities. And then as well, an ongoing desire to keep in touch with what we're learning about students through the mental health screening. So navigators sown to grow, ensuring that both educators are hearing from their students what they need, and that also we're able to fulfill those services, especially if we see any impact of federal funding, knowing that mental health is an important part of the SEL services we provide. And then in order to continue to advocate for SEL supports, mental health supports, knowing more as we can about the relationship between the supports that we offer in terms of mental health and SEL, and the relationship to important student outcomes such as attendance and discipline. Lastly, thinking about transitions, ongoing questions, and just wanting to ensure that parents and faculty are hearing what they can and being involved in the MLK head transition, and then especially looking at the change in TSU, but also thinking about the new TCAT partnership. Just what are the ways in which we can continue to support students as they enter into the University MNPS scholarship category. Lastly, these are just sort of general things, but ongoing community engagement and support for peer, knowing that that's an essential part of how the board in particular, but the staff and the community are learning about what is working, what could be improved, the ability to give short-term feedback to make changes in real time. That partnership will need funding, and so making sure that we're looking for external funding, working with Vanderbilt to do that is something that has been highlighted as well. I think that's my last slide. So any things that you all didn't hear that you would like to mention? Also, this is always a time in which I like to say, continuing to give high quality feedback, and folks, do a really good job of getting in there and giving timely feedback. But, being pointed about any questions that you have, we do then tend to see those things come in front of the board in the director's update time in other times. It's a good way to keep Dr. Battle apprised of the things that we're all thinking about. But anything that anyone would like to highlight or mention? Wait. Oh, yeah, that's fine. While you're looking, I just also to give a shout out to Dr. Battle and her team for putting together a really good set of information for us. I find myself going back to these reports to look at sort of what have we done and where are we. So they're super helpful just to have in general as well.
And I just want to thank Member Block for constantly keeping us on task with this, but also coming out and refining the evaluation process to make sure it's data driven and we're not doing this, that we're able to evaluate on data, on empirical evidence that's going on, and continue to do this in a professional way. So I just want to thank you for your service in doing that.
Thank you. And with that, I should note that I am probably here in the next little bit before we get started with this year's evaluation process, just going to come to each of you to have a quick conversation about like what works, what doesn't work, how can we make changes. I have a few thoughts, but so that is to come as well. But thank you all for participating in this, because it's it's only as good as the feedback that we are giving, and giving regular feedback helps to reinforce that this is an important process, both for us and for Dr. Battle. And I should just check in really quickly. Dr. Battle, anything? And you don't even have to say anything.
Oh, ma'am. Nothing in addition for me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, guys.